The morning began like any other in the quiet suburb of Lakewood Pines. The air was crisp, sprinklers hummed softly in the background, and Brandon was halfway through his first sip of coffee when something outside made him freeze. There, gleaming in the soft golden light of dawn, sat two identical white Teslas parked directly across his driveway, perfectly aligned, completely blocking his garage. For a second, he wondered if he was still half asleep. He blinked once, twice, and leaned closer to the window. No mistake, they were real. Two spotless luxury cars that definitely didn't belong to him. His confusion shifted into disbelief. Who in their right mind parks two cars on someone else's property? Still holding his mug, Brandon slipped on his sneakers and stepped outside. The morning air bit at his skin, the scent of fresh asphalt mixing with the faint sweetness of coffee. He stood there staring at the glossy cars, their tinted windows reflecting his bewildered expression back at him. Both vehicles had temporary plates and looked freshly delivered, positioned as if for display instead of parking. Then a familiar voice sliced through the quiet. "Oh, good morning, Brandon." He turned to see her, Dahlia Henderson, 40 years old, blonde, and wrapped in a blinding purple pantsuit that radiated self-importance. She balanced a tablet in one manicured hand and a phone in the other, strutting across the lawn like it was her personal stage. Brandon blinked slowly. "Morning, Dahlia, I'm guessing those are yours?" She gave a light, artificial laugh, the kind that instantly made his jaw tighten. "Oh, these? Well, technically, they're here for my HOA event today. Luxury lifestyle brunch. You probably wouldn't have heard about it." Brandon tilted his head. "And you decided my driveway was the venue?" Dahlia smiled, all teeth and no warmth. "Your house has the best lighting. The Teslas look stunning against your garage. It's for community engagement, Brandon. You should be proud to be part of something inspiring." He stared at her for a long beat. Then flatly, "You parked two cars on my property without asking." Her expression didn't waver. "Relax, it's just for a few hours. You weren't planning to use your driveway this morning, were you?" Brandon's patience thinned like melting ice. "That's not the point. You can't just—" But she'd already turned away, tapping quickly on her phone, clearly done with the conversation. He exhaled, tightening his grip on the mug. The warmth steadied him barely. This wasn't the first time Dahlia had crossed a line. She'd once reported him for painting his mailbox the wrong shade of black. Another time, she'd complained about his leaf blower being too loud for community standards. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, armed with bylaws, spreadsheets, and an unshakable sense of superiority. But this was new. Brandon walked around the Teslas, inspecting them. Not a scratch, not a smudge. They gleamed like showroom models. He thought about his options: call a tow truck, file a complaint, knock again, but he already knew how it would go. Dahlia always got her way. She was close with the HOA president and loved quoting obscure rules, ending every email with "regards." Laughter drifted from across the yard. A small group of women in designer sunglasses were setting up tables, arranging pastries and champagne flutes. He could hear Dahlia's syrupy voice carrying over the fence. "Both mine, yes. The white one's the performance model. It's all about minimalism and success, ladies." Brandon blinked. "Both mine." The nerve of her was almost impressive. Inside, he set his mug down and stared at the ceiling, his jaw tight. This wasn't just about parking, it was about respect. Or rather, the complete lack of it. He tried calling the HOA president, Mark. "Morning, Mark. Dahlia's parked two cars in my driveway. Says it's for an event." Mark's voice came through, tired and hesitant. "Oh, yeah. She mentioned something about a community showcase. Technically, as long as it's under 4 hours. On my property," Brandon cut in. A pause. "Well, it's temporary." Brandon hung up without another word. Of course. The HOA always bent for Dahlia. When he looked outside again, she was posing for photos beside the Teslas, hair flipping in the sunlight while her guests clapped. One woman shouted, "You're such an inspiration, Dahlia." Brandon exhaled through his nose. Inspiration, right? Minutes stretched into hours. The car stayed. Guests came and went. Someone spilled a mimosa on his lawn. The laughter, the camera flashes, the sound of Dahlia's heels clicking. It all dug into his nerves like static. By early afternoon, the sun was high and hot, turning the scene into a shimmering display of arrogance. Brandon's pulse quickened. He had tried patience, reason, politeness. Now something else took hold. A calm, deliberate resolve. He stepped outside again, arms folded. Dahlia was arranging gift bags in the trunk of one Tesla, still grinning like she owned the neighborhood. "Dahlia," he said evenly. "Move the cars now." She didn't even glance up. "Oh, relax, Brandon. You're being dramatic. Last warning." Finally, she turned, her eyes flashing. "You wouldn't dare touch my vehicles. You'll regret it." Brandon stared back at her, calm now, unnervingly calm. "You sure about that?" he asked quietly. For just a second, her confident smile flickered, but she quickly looked away, waving him off like he wasn't worth her time. Brandon turned and walked back toward his house, the gears in his mind turning steadily. There was no winning through the HOA and no reasoning with someone like her. But that didn't mean he was helpless. The door clicked shut behind him, echoing through the quiet. He stood in the dim kitchen, watching the faint reflection of those Teslas through the window. What came to him next wasn't rash, it was deliberate, simple, satisfying. If Dahlia wanted a show, he'd give her one. He opened the garage door. Light spilled in, catching the edges of a row of paint buckets left from his last home project. Blue and red, the same colors he'd used on his garden fence. He rested his hand on one of the lids. The thought of those bold colors filling the scene outside felt poetic. From the yard came laughter. Someone called out, "Dahlia, these cars look amazing in this light." Brandon smiled faintly. "Let's make them unforgettable," he murmured. He stepped into the garage, the opener humming as the door lowered again, narrowing the daylight to a thin golden line before cutting it off completely. The soft clink of the paint handle echoed in the quiet. He stirred the thick liquid slowly, the swirl of color shining under the light. Outside, laughter rose again, each sound a spark feeding the calm determination building in his chest. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about principle. Moments later, he stepped outside, setting a bucket down near the front bumper of one Tesla. The smooth white surface reflected his steady face back at him. Inside the yard, someone gasped. "Dahlia, someone's at your car." Her laughter cut off instantly. She turned and froze at the sight of Brandon beside the now painted car, a brush in his hand and color glistening across the hood. Her voice cracked in disbelief. "What are you doing?" Brandon looked up, calm as ever. "Just adding a little color to your display." The white was a bit dull, her face twisted in fury. "You've completely lost it." "That's vandalism. You'll pay for this." "Funny," he said evenly. "That's exactly what I was going to tell you." By now, the brunch guests had gathered near the driveway, phones raised, whispering like spectators at a live performance. Dahlia pointed at him, trembling with outrage. "You move those cars right now or I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Brandon replied. "Let's see what they think about parking on private property." Her jaw tightened. "They'll side with me. They always do. Not today." Within minutes, the sound of sirens rose in the distance. Dahlia folded her arms, a smug smile returning. "Good. Let them see what you've done." "You'll regret this, Brandon." He didn't answer. He just waited, arms crossed, as the police cruiser rolled up, tires crunching against the gravel. Two officers stepped out, one older and composed, the other younger and cautious. Dahlia rushed toward them, her voice full of practiced distress. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man destroyed my property. Look what he did to my Teslas." The younger officer frowned. "Your Teslas?" "Yes, mine," she snapped. "He's out of control. I want him charged immediately." Brandon waited for her to finish, then spoke calmly. "Officers, those vehicles were parked on my driveway without permission. I asked her several times to move them. She refused. Everything's recorded on my security cameras." The older officer turned toward Dahlia. "Ma'am, is that true? Did you have permission to park here?" She lifted her chin. "I don't need permission. I'm on the HOA board. We have community rights." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Community rights don't apply to someone else's private property." Her confidence wavered, but she tried to hold her ground. "It doesn't matter. They're my cars." The younger officer knelt beside one vehicle, studying the temporary tags and typing something into his tablet. After a moment, he looked up, puzzled. "Ma'am, these vehicles are registered to EV Showcase Rentals. They're not under your name." Dahlia froze. They're temporarily mine for display purposes." Brandon's expression softened into the faintest smile. "So not yours then." The older officer exhaled through his nose. Ma'am, you parked rental vehicles on someone else's property without permission and left them unattended. That's trespassing. Dahlia's face turned pale. No, he's the one who damaged them. Look at this mess. The officer motioned toward the colorful streaks drying across the Teslas. You'll need to take that up with the rental company. Since these aren't your vehicles, you don't have legal standing to claim damage, her voice cracked. But he did this. I want him arrested. The younger officer turned to Brandon. Sir, did you intentionally apply paint to the vehicles? Brandon nodded calmly. Yes, as a visible marker of trespassing after multiple warnings. I have full video proof of her refusal to move them. He gestured toward the small camera mounted above his garage, its red light blinking steadily like a silent witness. The older officer faced Dahlia again. He has clear video evidence showing you ignored repeated requests. You understand that puts you in violation of property law, she stammered. But I'm the HOA chair. You can't find me, his tone hardened. We're not talking about HOA bylaws, ma'am. We're talking about state property law. You'll receive a citation for trespassing, and the rental company will likely pursue you for damages. Brandon watched as her confidence began to crumble, her authority peeling away like old paint. The guests who had been filming were now whispering to each other, phones lowered, eyes wide. The younger officer wrote the citation while Dahlia tried to compose herself. You don't understand, she muttered. Those cars were supposed to be part of a campaign. An image, Brandon said quietly, almost kindly. Well, you created quite an image today. Her glare sharpened. You'll regret this, Brandon. You'll see what the HOA does when I file my report. He met her fury with silence, hands resting in his pockets. The officers finished their notes and began escorting her back toward her yard for documentation. The small crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring as they left. When the last voices faded, Brandon stood before the two Teslas. They looked like modern art now, splashed in vivid layers of blue and red that shimmered in the afternoon light. The air carried the scent of paint and quiet vindication. He stood still, listening to Dahlia's fading protests as the officers continued their questioning. The tension that had gripped him all morning loosened, replaced by something steadier. Justice, maybe, or balance. The older officer glanced back before leaving. We'll contact the rental company. Keep that footage handy, sir. Brandon nodded, already backed up. By the time the cruiser pulled away, the sun had begun to dip low, casting long, amber shadows across the street. The Teslas sat in silence, coated in hardened streaks of blue and red that glowed faintly under the fading light. Brandon returned to his window, arms crossed, watching as Dahlia paced in her yard, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was muffled, but her agitation carried clearly through the calm evening air. Every few seconds she gestured toward his driveway, pointing furiously as if the scene itself had betrayed her. He should have felt triumphant, but satisfaction came slowly. A part of him half expected her to twist the story again, to find a loophole and reclaim control. That was what Dahlia did. She thrived on power, but tonight her movements were uncertain. The woman who once commanded every HOA meeting now looked small beneath the setting sun, her purple pantsuit glaring against the deepening dusk. Brandon's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello, Mr. Brandon. This is Detective Ward with Lakewood PD, said a calm, professional voice. We've confirmed with EV Showcase Rentals that the vehicles were parked illegally on your property. They filed a separate complaint against Miss Dahlia for unauthorized use and damage to rental property. You're not under investigation, but we may need a brief statement. Brandon exhaled quietly. Thank you, Detective. One more thing, Ward added. The footage clearly shows her parking the vehicles and refusing to move them. That'll help us close this quickly. Appreciate it, Brandon replied before ending the call. He set the phone down and let a slow smile spread across his face. A rare, genuine one. For the first time in days, the weight in his chest lifted. Outside, Dahlia's voice rose again, sharp and panicked. The rhythm of it was familiar. Denial, blame, desperation. He watched as she argued into the phone, her gestures frantic. Then a deep rumble rolled through the cul-de-sac. A black tow truck turned onto the street, the rental company's logo glinting on its door. It stopped in front of his driveway. A man in overalls stepped out, clipboard in hand. You the renter? He asked. Dahlia hesitated. Well, yes, but there's been a misunderstanding. Not my concern, he said flatly. We're here to recover both vehicles. You'll receive an invoice for damages and late return fees. She took a step back. You can't take them, they're evidence. The police, he cut her off without looking up, already cleared it. We were told to proceed. Brandon leaned against the wall watching as the man attached chains and ramps. The metallic clank echoed down the quiet street like the sound of closure itself. As the first Tesla lifted onto the truck, Dahlia turned toward his house. Their eyes met for a moment, hers burning with fury, humiliation, and something else he'd never seen before. Fear of consequence. Then she turned away, muttering under her breath as the tow truck drove off with what had once been her pride on display. For the first time, Lakewood Pines was quiet again. The second car followed soon after, both gleaming under the streetlight despite their bold coats of paint. When the tow truck finally pulled away, its rumbling engine faded into the night, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt almost tangible. Dahlia lingered for a moment, staring at the empty stretch of concrete as if sheer willpower could bring the cars back. Then she turned sharply and stormed inside, slamming her door so hard that her porch light flickered. The quiet that followed was heavier than before. Brandon stepped onto his porch, hands in his pockets, the cool air biting softly at his skin. The faint scent of paint still clung to the evening breeze, mixing with the earthy smell of dew. His driveway looked like a battlefield, splattered, chaotic, and somehow perfect. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Justice, he thought, didn't always arrive clean or simple. Sometimes it looked messy, smelled like paint thinner, and raised a few eyebrows from the neighbors. But tonight it felt right. The next morning an envelope appeared in his mailbox. No return address. He tore it open expecting another HOA warning. Instead he found a citation notice issued to Dahlia, $500 for trespassing, plus $1,000 in damages owed to EV Showcase Rentals. Attached was a printed email from the rental company, thanking him for his cooperation and confirming that no charges would be filed against him. He laughed quietly at first, then louder, startling a nearby crow into flight. Reading the letter twice, he pinned it to his refrigerator like a small trophy. Around noon, he saw her again. Dahlia stood on her porch, sunglasses hiding her eyes, her hair unkempt, her once sharp purple pantsuit replaced by an oversized hoodie. For the first time, she wasn't holding her phone. She just stood there staring at his house. When she noticed him watching, she turned quickly and disappeared inside. Over the next few days, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. People who once avoided her now traded stories about her arrogance, her downfall, her spectacular fall from grace. Someone had posted the photos of the painted Teslas before the tow truck arrived, captioned, "When karma comes in two colors." The post went viral overnight. Brandon stumbled across it later that week, over 1 million views filled with ruthless, amused comments. One read, "Never mess with a man's driveway." Another said simply, "HOA Karen got splattered. He didn't share it or comment." He didn't need to. The satisfaction wasn't in the mockery. It was in the quiet balance that had finally been restored. Still, the HOA couldn't resist. 3 days later, another envelope arrived. The letter was short and formal. "Mr. Brandon, this is a reminder that all exterior paint use must comply with community disposal guidelines. Please ensure residual materials are properly discarded. Regards, HOA compliance." He laughed again, longer this time. Then he printed a copy of Dahlia's fine, taped it to the envelope, and mailed it back with a sticky note that read, "Consider handled." A week passed. The red and blue stains on the concrete slowly faded under rain and sunlight, but he didn't rush to clean them. They were proof, remnants of a victory that needed no explanation. Then one morning he found another note tucked under his windshield wiper. The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar. "Apologies for the inconvenience. Ms. Henderson has resigned from the HOA board effective immediately. Thank you for your patience and cooperation. Show management." Brandon read it twice, smiling as he folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. He looked down at the faintly stained driveway, the last traces of paint glimmering in the morning sun like an artist's signature. The neighborhood was quiet again, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, carrying with it the calm after justice.